Hello there, you're listening to the planet's memory where time breathes and the Earth remembers. There is a question that haunts the deepest corners of human consciousness, a question that awakens in the quiet moments when we stare into the night sky and wonder if we are truly alone, if we are truly the first, if we are truly the only ones to have walked this ancient planet and dared to call ourselves intelligent. It is a question that sends shivers down the spine and makes the heart beat faster with a mixture of terror and wonder. A question that has been whispered in the halls of science and shouted in the dreams of philosophers. A question that may hold the key to understanding not just where we came from, but where we are going, and whether we will survive long enough to find out. How many times has Earth started over? How many civilizations have risen from the dust only to be swept away by forces beyond their control, or by their own terrible mistakes? How many intelligent species have looked up at the same stars we see tonight and believed they would last forever, only to vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but ghosts and shadows and fragments of what they once were? This is not a story about survival. This is not a story about triumph. This is a story about cycles, about patterns that repeat across millions of years, about the cruel mathematics of extinction and rebirth, about the terrifying possibility that we are not the first chapter in Earth's story, but merely the latest and perhaps not the last. Tonight, we journey into the depths of time itself, into the archaeological mysteries that refuse to be explained, into the geological catastrophes that reshaped continents and obliterated entire branches of the Tree of Life, into the scientific theories that challenge everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. We will explore the evidence, examine the theories, confront the uncomfortable truths, and ask ourselves the most important question of all. If Earth has reset before, could it happen again? And if so, are we ready? Or are we simply repeating the same fatal mistakes that doomed those who came before us? The earth beneath our feet is older than our minds can truly comprehend, a spinning ball of rock and metal and water that has circled the sun for 4.5 billion years, witnessing changes so profound and transformations so complete that the planet we inhabit today would be unrecognizable to any creature that walked its surface even a few 100 million years ago. In all that vast expanse of time, life has emerged and evolved and diversified into millions upon millions of species, each one adapted to its particular environment, each one struggling to survive and reproduce and pass its genes to the next generation. But the story of life on Earth is not a steady upward climb from simplicity to complexity, from primitive to advanced, from mindless to conscious. Instead, it is a story punctuated by catastrophes, by mass extinctions that wiped out the majority of species alive at the time, by planetary resets that cleared the board and allowed evolution to start fresh with whatever survivors managed to cling to existence through the chaos. These extinctions are not theoretical abstractions or academic curiosities. They are real events that have been documented in the rock layers of our planet, written in the language of fossils and geological upheaval, confirmed by multiple lines of evidence that converge on the same terrifying conclusion. Earth has killed most of its children not once or twice, but repeatedly throughout its long history, and it will likely do so again. The conventional scientific narrative tells us about 5 major mass extinctions in Earth's past, events so devastating that they serve as boundaries between different geological periods, markers of time when the old world ended and a new world began. These are the extinctions we learn about in school, the ones with names like the Ordovician-Silurian extinction and the Permian-Triassic extinction and the Cretaceous-Palagine extinction that killed the dinosaurs. But this standard list may be incomplete, may be only the most obvious and well-documented cases of planetary catastrophe, while countless smaller extinctions and regional die-offs have left fainter traces in the geological record. Moreover, the conventional narrative focuses almost exclusively on the extinction of non-intelligent life, on the death of dinosaurs and trilobites and ancient sea creatures, that never developed the capacity for complex thought or technological civilization, it rarely asks the more unsettling question, what if some of those extinct species were intelligent? What if some of them built societies and created tools and wondered about their place in the universe, just as we do today? What if the evidence of their existence has been ground to dust by the turning of geological ages, buried so deep or destroyed so completely that we would never find it, even if we knew where to look? This question may seem like science fiction, like the plot of a fantasy novel rather than a serious scientific inquiry, but it is actually grounded in a profound understanding of how geological processes work and how much information is lost over vast periods of time. Consider that modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years, a blink of an eye in geological terms, and that we have only built technological civilization within the last few thousand years, an even tinier fraction of Earth's history. Consider that most of what we build is temporary, made of materials that corrode and decay and crumble away, and that even our most impressive structures will eventually be worn down by wind and water and the slow but inexorable forces of erosion. And if some future species were to evolve millions of years from now and attempt to find evidence of our existence, they would have an extremely difficult task ahead of them. They might find a few scattered traces, perhaps some unusually pure concentrations of metals in certain rock layers, perhaps some anomalous chemical signatures that hint at industrial activity, perhaps a handful of fossils if they were very lucky, but they would never find our cities, never find our books, never find most of the artifacts we consider important, because all of those things would have been destroyed by time itself, ground into sediment, and recycled into new rocks and scattered across the globe beyond recognition. This realization leads to a troubling possibility. If it is so difficult to find evidence of a technological civilization after just a few million years, how could we possibly detect one that existed tens or hundreds of millions of years ago? The Earth's crust is not a static archive that preserves everything forever. It is a dynamic system where old rocks are constantly being destroyed and new rocks are constantly being created, where tectonic plates collide and subduct and carry ancient seafloors down into the mantle to be melted and recycled, where mountains are thrust up and then worn down to plains over tens of millions of years, where the surface is reshaped again and again until almost nothing remains of what came before. The oldest rocks on Earth's surface are only about 4 billion years old, and even these are rare survivors, tiny fragments of ancient crust that have somehow escaped destruction. Most of the rocks we see around us are much younger, formed within the last few 100 million years, meaning that any evidence of civilizations older than that would have been completely erased from the geological record. We are essentially trying to read a book that has had most of its pages torn out and burned, and then trying to reconstruct the entire story from the few scattered words that remain. It is a humbling thought, and it forces us to admit that there is much about Earth's past that we simply cannot know, not because we lack the technology or the intelligence to find it, but because the information itself no longer exists. Despite these limitations, there are clues, tantalizing hints and anomalies that suggest the story of life on Earth may be more complex and more strange than we have imagined. There are mysteries in the fossil record that resist easy explanation, gaps and discontinuities that seem to indicate rapid evolutionary changes or the sudden appearance of new forms of life without obvious ancestors. There are geological formations that bear the scars of catastrophes beyond anything in recorded human history, evidence of impacts and volcanic eruptions, and climate shifts so severe that they challenge our understanding of what is possible. There are ancient myths and legends from cultures around the world that speak of previous worlds and earlier humanities that were destroyed by floods or fires or other disasters. Stories that were dismissed as primitive superstition but that may actually preserve dim cultural memories of real events. There are mathematical models and computer simulations that suggest the conditions for intelligent life may have existed on Earth much earlier than we thought, and that the emergence of intelligence may be more likely and more common than we assumed. All of these pieces of evidence taken together paint a picture of a planet that has been home to many experiments in complexity and consciousness, a planet that has nurtured life in countless forms and then periodically wiped the slate clean, forcing evolution to start over and try again. To understand how Earth resets itself, we must journey back to the first of the great extinctions, an event so ancient that it occurred when the continents were arranged in completely different positions, and when the life on Earth bore little resemblance to anything alive today. This was the Ordovician-Silurian extinction, which took place approximately 445 million years ago, at a time when life was still confined almost entirely to the oceans, and when the largest creatures on land were probably small arthropods like scorpions and millipedes. The Ordovician period had been a time of incredible diversification, when the seas teemed with strange and wonderful creatures like trilobites and brachiopods and cephalopods, when coral reefs were just beginning to form and create complex underwater ecosystems, when the first primitive fish were evolving jaws and fins, and the anatomical innovations that would eventually allow their descendants to colonize the land. It seemed like life was flourishing, expanding into every available niche, becoming more complex and more diverse with each passing million years. But then something went terribly wrong. The exact cause of the Ordovician-Silurian extinction is still debated by scientists, but the most widely accepted theory involves a rapid and severe ice age that gripped the planet and locked up vast amounts of water in massive glaciers that covered much of the southern supercontinent of Gondwana. This glaciation would have caused sea levels to drop dramatically, draining the shallow continental seas where most marine life lived, and destroying the habitats that countless species depended on for survival. At the same time, the formation of glaciers would have disrupted ocean currents and atmospheric circulation patterns, causing temperatures to plummet and creating harsh conditions that many organisms were simply not adapted to handle. The extinction occurred in two pulses, separated by a few 100,000 years, suggesting that the planet was subjected to not one but two episodes of environmental catastrophe. In the first pulse, it is estimated that about 25% of marine families went extinct, a devastating blow to the biosphere but not yet the worst of it. In the second pulse, the death toll increased, and by the time the crisis was over, approximately 85% of all species on Earth had disappeared forever, their genetic lineages terminated, their evolutionary experiments brought to an abrupt end. For those species that survived, the world that emerged after the extinction was a strange and empty place, a planet with far fewer inhabitants and far more opportunities for those that remained. Evolution works through competition and adaptation, and when most of your competitors have been removed from the game, the rules change dramatically. The survivors of the Ordovician-Silurian extinction were able to expand into ecological niches that had been occupied by now extinct species, developing new adaptations and new strategies, and eventually giving rise to entirely new groups of organisms. This is one of the paradoxes of mass extinction. While they are catastrophic in the short term, they can actually accelerate evolution in the long term by clearing away established species and creating space for innovation and experimentation. The extinction that ended the Ordovician period paved the way for the Silurian period, which saw the continued evolution of fish and the first appearance of vascular plants on land, the beginning of the long process by which life would finally conquer the terrestrial environment and transform Earth from a planet of water and bare rock into a planet of forests and grasslands and complex terrestrial ecosystems. But here we must pause and ask a question that is rarely considered in discussions of this ancient extinction. Could any of the species that died have been intelligent? Could any of them have possessed the capacity for complex thought, for communication, for the kind of abstract reasoning that we associate with consciousness? The conventional answer would be an immediate and confident no, based on the assumption that intelligence requires a large and complex brain, and that such brains only evolved much later in Earth's history. in lineages like primates and cetaceans and birds, but this assumption may be overly restrictive, based on a limited understanding of what intelligence can be and how it can manifest. We know from modern biology that even relatively simple nervous systems can produce surprisingly sophisticated behaviors, that octopuses with brains very different from ours can solve problems and use tools and demonstrate what appears to be genuine curiosity and playfulness. We know that social insects like ants and bees can collectively accomplish feats of engineering and organization that rival the achievements of much larger animals, that distributed intelligence across a colony can substitute for individual intelligence in a single brain. We know that intelligence comes in many forms, and that our human-centered definition of what it means to be intelligent may blind us to other possibilities. Could there have been intelligent cephalopods in the Ordovician seas, creatures with complex nervous systems and problem-solving abilities, and perhaps even rudimentary culture passing information from one generation to the next through observation and imitation? Could there have been colonial organisms that achieved a form of collective intelligence, coordinating their activities through chemical signals or other means we can barely imagine? The fossil record from this period is fragmentary at best, preserving mostly hard parts like shells and skeletal structures, while the soft tissues that would reveal brain anatomy and neural complexity have long since decayed. We see the shapes of ancient creatures, but we cannot know their minds, cannot know what they experienced or how they perceived the world, or whether they were aware of their own existence in any meaningful sense. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and while we have no proof that intelligent life existed in the Ordovician period, we also have no proof that it did not. The question must remain open, a reminder that the deep past holds secrets we may never uncover. What we do know with certainty is that the Ordovician Silurian extinction was a planetary reset, an event that fundamentally changed the trajectory of life on Earth and demonstrated that no matter how successful or well-adapted or diverse a biosphere becomes, it remains vulnerable to forces beyond its control. The ice age that caused this extinction was probably triggered by a combination of factors, including changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, shifts in ocean chemistry, and the arrangement of continents in positions that allowed large ice sheets to form. None of the organisms alive at the time could have understood what was happening to their planet, could have measured the dropping temperatures, or analysed the changing sea levels, or predicted the coming catastrophe. They simply lived their lives, following the instincts and behaviours that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution, until suddenly their environment became uninhabitable and they died, not as individuals but as entire species, their evolutionary potential extinguished in the blink of a geological eye. It was the first great reset, but it would not be the last. Moving forward through deep time, we come to another catastrophic period known as the Late Devonian Extinction, a series of events that unfolded between 375 and 360 million years ago and that once again decimated life on Earth. The Devonian period had been called the Age of Fishes, a time when jawed fish diversified into an incredible array of forms, from tiny predators to massive armoured giants that ruled the ancient seas. It was also the period when plants finally conquered the land in a big way, evolving from small primitive forms into the first true forests, with trees that grew dozens of meters tall and created complex terrestrial ecosystems for the first time in Earth's history. These forests were unlike anything alive today, dominated by strange plants like giant club mosses and primitive tree ferns, creating landscapes that would look alien and otherworldly to modern eyes. The arrival of forests had profound effects on the planet, changing weather patterns, altering erosion rates, and most importantly affecting the composition of the atmosphere and the chemistry of the oceans through the processes of photosynthesis and organic matter burial. The Late Devonian extinction did not happen all at once, but rather unfolded as a series of pulses spread over perhaps 15 million years, making it difficult to pinpoint a single cause or mechanism. different extinction pulses affected different groups of organisms, suggesting that multiple environmental stresses were at work, compounding and interacting in complex ways. One leading theory points to the forests themselves as the culprits, or at least as major contributing factors to the crisis. As forests spread across the continents, they began to weather rock on a massive scale, their roots breaking apart minerals and releasing nutrients into rivers and streams that carried these materials down to the oceans. This influx of nutrients would have triggered algal blooms and bacterial activity in coastal waters, consuming oxygen and creating vast dead zones where most animals could not survive. At the same time, the burial of organic matter from dead plants was removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away in sediments, potentially triggering global cooling and climate instability. The very success of plant life on land may have poisoned the oceans and disrupted the climate, demonstrating once again that major changes to one part of Earth's system can have catastrophic effects on other parts. Other factors may have contributed to the late Devonian extinction as well, including volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and changes in ocean circulation patterns. Some researchers have suggested that the planet may have experienced a period of severe ozone depletion, allowing dangerous ultraviolet radiation to reach the surface and harming organisms that lacked protection from UV damage. The evidence for this comes from the types of species that went extinct, particularly shallow water organisms and those that depended on photosynthesis, which would have been most vulnerable to increased UV radiation. Whatever the exact combination of causes, the result was devastating. Approximately 75% of all species vanished, including most of the armored fish that had dominated the Devonian seas, and many of the reef-building organisms that created complex marine habitats. The extinction hit marine life particularly hard, but it also affected life on land, disrupting the newly established terrestrial ecosystems and forcing plants and animals to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. In the aftermath of the late Devonian extinction, the planet once again reset itself, clearing away dominant groups and allowing new lineages to rise and diversify. The extinction created opportunities for new types of fish to evolve, including the ancestors of modern bony fish and sharks, and it paved the way for the age of amphibians as four-limbed vertebrates began to exploit terrestrial habitats more fully. The forests eventually recovered and continued to spread, but their composition changed, with new types of plants replacing those that had gone extinct. The late Devonian extinction is a reminder that even positive developments, like the colonization of land by plants, can have unintended consequences that cascade through Earth's systems in unpredictable ways. It shows us that the planet operates as an interconnected whole, where changes to the atmosphere affect the oceans and changes to the oceans affect life on land, and where feedbacks between different components of the system can amplify small perturbations into global catastrophes. Once again, we must ask whether any of the organisms that perished in this extinction might have possessed intelligence or advanced cognitive abilities. The Devonian period was home to some very large fish, including predators with body lengths exceeding 6 meters, creatures with complex sensory systems and behaviors that would have required sophisticated neural processing. Some of these fish had armor and jaws powerful enough to crush shells and bones, suggesting active hunting strategies that would have demanded spatial reasoning and perhaps even social coordination if they hunted in groups. Could any of these creatures have developed intelligence comparable to modern dolphins or whales? Animals that live in water and yet possess cognitive abilities that rival and sometimes exceed those of land mammals. Could there have been amphibians or early tetrapods with complex social structures and communication systems, living in the swamps and estuaries where land meets water? The fossil record tells us what these creatures looked like and gives us hints about their ecology and behavior, but it cannot tell us what went on inside their heads, cannot reveal whether they experienced fear or pain or curiosity or any of the mental states we associate with consciousness. The challenge of detecting ancient intelligence becomes even more difficult when we consider that intelligence may not always leave obvious traces in the fossil record. A species does not need to develop technology to be intelligent, does not need to build cities or smelt metal or write books to demonstrate complex cognitive abilities. Many modern intelligent species like elephants and octopuses and corvid birds live lives that would leave minimal archaeological evidence if they were to go extinct and their remains were to fossilize. Their intelligence manifests in behaviors like tool use and social cooperation and problem solving, traits that are visible to observers, but that do not necessarily produce durable artifacts that would survive millions of years of geological processes. If a Devonian-era species had achieved even a modest level of intelligence, using perhaps simple tools made of organic materials or engaging in complex social behaviors that did not require permanent structures, we would have almost no way of knowing about it from the fossils alone. The absence of evidence for ancient intelligence is expected given the limitations of fossilization and the vast amount of time involved, but this absence cannot be interpreted as definitive proof that such intelligence never existed. If the earlier extinctions were terrible, they were merely prologue to the greatest catastrophe in the history of complex life on Earth, an event so devastating that it nearly ended the evolutionary experiment altogether and came perilously close to sterilizing the planet. This was the Permian-Triassic extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, which occurred approximately 252 million years ago at the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods. The numbers alone are staggering. It is estimated that 96% of all marine species went extinct, along with 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species and 83% of insect species. Insects, which are normally remarkably resilient to environmental changes, suffered their only known mass extinction during this event, highlighting just how severe and all-encompassing the crisis was. The Great Dying was not a quick event, but rather unfolded over perhaps 60,000 years, a geological instant but long enough that any organisms living through it would have witnessed their world slowly collapsing around them, ecosystems breaking down, familiar species disappearing, the conditions for life deteriorating year after year with no relief in sight. The cause of the Permian-Triassic extinction is one of the most intensively studied questions in paleontology, and the evidence points to a catastrophic series of volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia, events so massive and prolonged that they released enormous quantities of lava and gases into the environment. These eruptions created what are known as the Siberian Traps, vast fields of volcanic rock covering millions of square kilometers, deposited by lava flows that continued for perhaps 1 million years. The volcanic gases released during these eruptions would have included carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other compounds that drastically altered the atmosphere and climate. The sulfur dioxide would have caused rapid cooling by reflecting sunlight back into space, while the CO2 would have caused warming through the greenhouse effect, creating wild temperature swings and making the climate unstable and unpredictable. The warming effect eventually won out, and global temperatures soared, perhaps increasing by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius or even more, creating a hothouse planet where even the poles were too warm for ice to exist. But the temperature change was only part of the problem. The warming oceans would have held less dissolved oxygen, creating hypoxic or even anoxic conditions where most marine animals could not survive. At the same time, the high carbon dioxide levels would have made the oceans more acidic, dissolving the shells of organisms like corals and mollusks, and disrupting the base of the marine food chain. On land, the combination of heat and acid rain would have devastated plant communities, reducing the photosynthetic capacity of the planet and causing food chains to collapse from the bottom up. Some researchers have suggested that the warming may have triggered the release of methane from frozen deposits on the seafloor and in permafrost, creating a runaway greenhouse effect that pushed temperatures even higher and made the extinction even worse. Others have proposed that the volcanic eruptions may have damaged the ozone layer, allowing harmful ultraviolet radiation to reach the surface. The truth is probably that all of these factors work together, creating a perfect storm of environmental catastrophe that attacked life from multiple angles simultaneously, overwhelming the ability of organisms to adapt or migrate or find refuge. The world that survived the Permian-Triassic extinction was a nightmare landscape, a planet stripped of its biodiversity and left with only the hardiest and most adaptable species. The fossil record from the early Triassic period shows ecosystems that are remarkably simple and impoverished compared to what came before, dominated by a few disaster species that were able to tolerate the harsh conditions. It took millions of years for life to recover even partially from the Great Dying, for food webs to rebuild and for biodiversity to increase again. Some groups that had been dominant in the Permian, like the synapsids that were the ancestors of mammals, were so devastated that they never regained their former diversity, while other groups, like the archosaurs, which would eventually give rise to dinosaurs and birds, took advantage of the empty world to expand and diversify. The Great Dying reset the trajectory of evolution so completely that the world before it seems almost like a different planet, inhabited by strange creatures that have no modern equivalents, while the world after it began the slow process of recovery that would eventually lead to the age of dinosaurs. When we contemplate the possibility of intelligent life existing before the Great Dying, we enter into even more speculative territory, but the speculation is not entirely unfounded. The Permian period was home to some highly successful and diverse groups of animals, including the synapsids, which were the dominant land vertebrates of their time. These were not dinosaurs, but rather a separate lineage that branched off earlier in vertebrate evolution, and they included both herbivores and carnivores, some quite large and some quite small, occupying virtually every terrestrial ecological niche. Some of these synapsids had relatively large brains for their body size, and some showed signs of complex social behavior, living in groups and possibly caring for their young. The most famous Permian synapsids are probably the Gorgonopsians, fearsome predators with saber-like teeth, but there were also many other forms, including the Dicynodonts, which were herbivores with beaks and tusks, some of which reached the size of modern cows or larger. Could any of these creatures have been intelligent? Could they have had complex mental lives, remembered their experiences, learned from their mistakes, communicated with their group members in sophisticated ways? Modern mammals are our reference point for what intelligence can look like, and we know that mammalian intelligence is closely tied to the neocortex, a part of the brain that is particularly well developed in primates and cetaceans and elephants. But synapsids were not mammals, at least not yet, though they were the ancestors of mammals and presumably had some of the same basic neural architecture. Did they have anything like a neocortex? Did they have the capacity for the kind of flexible, abstract thinking that characterizes mammalian intelligence? We cannot know for certain, but we can say that the selective pressures that favor intelligence, things like complex social environments and the need to predict the behavior of prey or predators or competitors, was certainly present in the Permian world. Intelligence is expensive in metabolic terms, requiring a lot of energy to maintain, but it can also be highly advantageous, allowing an organism to solve problems and adapt to changing circumstances in ways that instinct alone cannot match. If intelligence began to emerge in some Permian synapsids, even in a limited form, it would have been cut short by the Great Dying, wiped out along with everything else, leaving no legacy and no descendants that could build on that evolutionary innovation. The thought that intelligence might have been evolving in the Permian period only to be snuffed out by a volcanic catastrophe is both tragic and sobering. It suggests that the emergence of intelligence is not inevitable, not a goal toward which evolution is striving, but rather a contingent outcome that depends on the right combination of circumstances and that can be terminated at any moment by forces entirely outside the control of the organisms involved. It suggests that Earth's history could have gone in many different directions, that if the Siberian traps had not erupted, or if the eruptions had been less severe, the synapsids might have continued to diversify and evolve, and perhaps some of their descendants would have eventually developed intelligence equal to, or surpassing our own. In that alternate timeline, mammals might have risen to dominance much earlier, and the age of dinosaurs might never have occurred, and the planet we inhabit today might look completely different. But that is not what happened. The Great Dying occurred, the synapses were devastated, and evolution had to start over, building new ecosystems from the ruins of the old, and setting the stage for the next great chapter in Earth's history. After the long recovery from the Permian-Triassic extinction, life had finally begun to flourish again, and the Triassic period saw the emergence of many new groups of organisms, including the first dinosaurs, the first true mammals, the first pterosaurs, and the first crocodilian-like archosaurs. The ecosystems of the Triassic were different from anything that had come before, adapted to the warm climate and the unique environmental conditions of the time. But once again, just as life seemed to be regaining its complexity and diversity, disaster struck. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction occurred approximately 201 million years ago, and while it was not as severe as the Great Dying, it was still a major catastrophe that eliminated about 75 to 80% of all species. Like the Permian-Triassic extinction, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction is thought to have been caused by massive volcanic eruptions, this time associated with the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea and the opening of the Atlantic Ocean. These eruptions, known as the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, released vast amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases, causing rapid global warming, ocean acidification, and disruption of the climate system. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction had a profound effect on the course of evolution because it determined which groups would dominate the subsequent Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Before the extinction, dinosaurs were present, but not particularly numerous or diverse, competing with other archosaur groups for dominance. After the extinction, many of those competing groups were gone, and dinosaurs were able to expand and diversify rapidly, eventually becoming the dominant land vertebrates for the next 135 million years. This is one of the clearest examples of how mass extinctions can shape the trajectory of evolution, not just by what they kill, but by what they allow to survive and flourish. If the Triassic-Jurassic extinction had not occurred, or if it had killed different groups, the age of dinosaurs might never have happened, and some other group might have risen to dominance instead. The history of life is full of such contingencies, moments when chance events determine the fate of entire lineages and redirect the course of evolution down paths that could not have been predicted in advance. The world of the early Jurassic, emerging from the ashes of the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, was a world ripe for innovation and experimentation. Dinosaurs diversified into an incredible array of forms, from small nimble predators to giant long-necked herbivores, from armored forms covered in bony plates to creatures that would eventually evolve feathers and take to the air. In the oceans, marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs filled the niches left vacant by earlier groups, becoming efficient predators and developing adaptations for fully aquatic life. On land, the first true mammals were small and mostly nocturnal, living in the shadows of the dinosaurs and waiting for their chance to diversify and expand, a chance that would not come for more than 100 million years. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods represent the longest sustained period of relatively stable conditions in the Phanerozoic eon, a time when life flourished and evolved without being interrupted by catastrophic mass extinctions, at least not until the very end. During this long span of time, we can ask once more whether intelligence might have evolved in any of the Earth's inhabitants. Dinosaurs ruled the land for far longer than mammals have, and during that time they evolved into forms of tremendous diversity and complexity. Some dinosaurs, particularly the theropods that were the ancestors of birds, had relatively large brains and sophisticated sensory systems, suggesting cognitive abilities that may have been quite advanced. The most famous example is probably the raptors, the dromaeosaurids like Velociraptor and Deinonychus, which are thought to have been intelligent and possibly social hunters, working together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. These animals had large brains relative to their body size, forward-facing eyes that suggest depth perception and visual focus, and grasping hands with sharp claws that could have been used for manipulation as well as for killing. Some paleontologists have speculated that if the dinosaurs had not gone extinct, some lineage of intelligent theropods might have eventually evolved human-level intelligence, developing technology and civilization, and becoming the dominant intelligent species on Earth. This speculation is based on the observation that the trend in theropod evolution was toward increased brain size and behavioral complexity, traits that often correlate with intelligence in modern animals. The evolution of birds from theropod dinosaurs demonstrates that this trend was real and that it eventually led to some of the most intelligent non-mammalian animals alive today, such as crows and parrots, which can use tools and solve complex problems and demonstrate a level of cognitive flexibility that rivals that of many mammals. If birds could evolve these abilities, starting from theropod ancestors, it is not unreasonable to imagine that some other theropod lineage, given more time, might have evolved even greater intelligence. That this is speculation, extrapolation, from trends that we see in the fossil record but that do not constitute proof of what actually happened. The dinosaurs did go extinct, or at least most of them did, and the question of whether they might have evolved intelligence remains unanswered, and probably unanswerable given the limitations of the evidence. There is another aspect to consider when thinking about intelligence in the age of dinosaurs, and that is the possibility of intelligence evolving in marine reptiles rather than in terrestrial dinosaurs. The ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and mosasaurs that inhabited the Mesozoic oceans were highly successful predators with complex sensory systems and behaviors. Some of them, particularly the mosasaurs, had large brains and may have been quite intelligent by reptilian standards. Modern marine mammals like dolphins and whales show us that the ocean can be a perfectly good environment for the evolution of intelligence, and that aquatic animals can develop cognitive abilities equal to or exceeding those of land animals despite the differences in their environment and sensory modalities. Could a mosasaur or a plesiosaur have been as smart as a dolphin? Could they have communicated with each other using vocalizations or body language, formed complex social groups, learned from experience and passed information to their offspring? We have no direct evidence for this, but we also have no evidence against it, and the question remains tantalizingly open. The reign of the dinosaurs came to an abrupt and violent end 66 million years ago, in what is probably the most famous mass extinction of all, the event that marks the boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, and that killed not only the non-avian dinosaurs but also the pterosaurs and the marine reptiles and many other groups of organisms. Unlike the earlier extinctions caused by volcanic eruptions and climate change, the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction was triggered by an asteroid impact, a collision between Earth and a chunk of rock from space approximately 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, traveling at a speed of perhaps 20 kilometers per second. The asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, creating a crater called Chicxulub that is about 180 kilometers in diameter, and that released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs, more than enough to cause global devastation. The impact would have vaporized the asteroid itself and a huge amount of rock from Earth's crust, sending debris high into the atmosphere and spreading it around the world. The immediate effects of the impact would have been catastrophic for anything near the impact site, with shockwaves and heat pulses and massive earthquakes and tsunamis radiating outward from the point of collision. But the global effects were even worse. The debris thrown into the atmosphere would have blocked out sunlight for months or even years, plunging the planet into a dark and cold impact winter that halted photosynthesis and caused temperatures to plummet. Plants would have died first, unable to perform photosynthesis without light, and then the herbivores that depended on plants would have starved, and then the carnivores that depended on herbivores would have followed, creating a cascade of extinction that worked its way through the food chain from bottom to top. At the same time, the impact would have triggered massive wildfires, perhaps burning as much as half of the world's forests, and the soot from these fires would have added to the darkness and the cooling. When the particles finally settled out of the atmosphere and the skies cleared, the survivors would have found themselves in a world that was initially cold and dark, but that then began to warm rapidly as carbon dioxide from the fires and from vaporized carbonate rocks accumulated in the atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect that persisted for thousands of years. The Cretaceous-Palagine extinction killed approximately 75% of all species on Earth, including every non-avian dinosaur, making it the most recent of the major mass extinctions, and the one we understand in the most detail thanks to the clear geological signature left by the asteroid impact. The boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene is marked by a thin layer of sediment enriched in iridium, an element that is rare in Earth's crust but common in asteroids, providing unmistakable evidence of an extraterrestrial impact. The extinction was selective in ways that reveal something about what factors determine survival during a catastrophe. Animals that could hibernate or burrow or go dormant for extended periods had a better chance of surviving the impact winter, as did animals that could survive on detritus or on stored food rather than requiring fresh plant growth. This is why small mammals and birds survived while large dinosaurs did not, and why crocodiles and turtles and many aquatic organisms made it through while most terrestrial animals perished. Size was a disadvantage during this extinction because large animals require more food and cannot easily find shelter or go dormant, while small animals can hide and reduce their metabolic needs and wait out the crisis. In the aftermath of the extinction, the world was once again reset, and the age of mammals began to for more than 160 million years. Mammals had lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, remaining mostly small and nocturnal and ecologically marginal. But with the dinosaurs gone, mammals were able to diversify and expand into the newly available ecological niches, evolving into forms ranging from tiny shrews to giant whales, from burrowing moles to flying bats, from grazing herbivores to apex predators. The radiation of mammals in the Cenozoic era, the age we are currently living in, is one of the great success stories of evolution, demonstrating once again how mass extinctions create opportunities for innovation, and how the survivors of catastrophe can go on to achieve dominance and diversity that would have been impossible in the world before the extinction. Without the Cretaceous-Palagine extinction, mammals would likely have remained small and marginal, and primates would never have evolved, and humans would never have existed. Our existence is a direct consequence of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, a sobering reminder of how contingent and accidental our presence on this planet really is. But before we move on to the age of mammals and the eventual emergence of humans, we must ask one more time whether the dinosaurs that died in the Cretaceous-Palagine extinction might have included intelligent species. By the end of the Cretaceous period, dinosaurs had been evolving for more than 160 million years, far longer than mammals have existed as a distinct group, and they had diversified into an incredible array of forms and ecological roles. Some of the late Cretaceous theropods, particularly the troodontids, had brain-to-body ratios that approached those of modern birds, and that were larger than those of most mammals of comparable size. Troodon, one of the best-known troodontids, had large eyes and grasping hands, and a brain structure that suggests it was capable of complex behaviors. Some paleontologists have speculated that if Troodon or a similar dinosaur had survived and continued to evolve, it might have eventually given rise to a truly intelligent species, perhaps even a technological species capable of building civilization. This speculation gave rise to a thought experiment in the 1980s when paleontologist Dale Russell constructed a hypothetical evolved descendant of Troodon, which he called the Dinosauroid, a humanoid creature with an upright posture and large brain and grasping hands. Imagined as what a dinosaur might look like if it evolved intelligence comparable to humans. The Dinosauroid was meant to be a speculative exercise, a way of exploring the question of how intelligence might evolve in a non-mammalian lineage, but it captured the public imagination and raised interesting questions about convergent evolution and whether there might be certain anatomical solutions that intelligence tends to favour. The idea that dinosaurs might have evolved intelligent is not mainstream science, but it is not entirely without merit either, based as it is on the observation that the trends in theropod evolution were moving in the direction of increased brain size and behavioural complexity. The extinction of the dinosaurs cut short these trends and prevented us from ever knowing where they might have led. With the dinosaurs gone and the planet recovering from the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, the stage was set for the rise of mammals and the eventual emergence of the intelligence that we recognise in ourselves and in some of our closest animal relatives. The early Paleogene period saw an explosive radiation of mammalian diversity, as small insectivorous and omnivorous creatures evolved into specialised herbivores and carnivores, and began to occupy all the ecological niches that had been dominated by dinosaurs for so long. Within just 10 million years of the extinction, mammals had evolved into forms as large as bears, and within 20 million years, they had produced giants like the rhinoceros-sized Uintatherium and the carnivorous creodonts. The speed of this diversification is remarkable and testifies to the evolutionary potential that had been locked up in the mammalian lineage, waiting for the opportunity to express itself. One of the most important groups to emerge during this time was the primates, the order that includes lemurs and monkeys and apes and humans. The earliest primates were small tree-dwelling creatures with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes, adaptations for life in the three-dimensional environment of the forest canopy, where depth perception and the ability to judge distances are crucial for survival. These early primates were not particularly intelligent by modern standards, but they had the basic anatomical and neurological equipment that would later be elaborated into the large and complex brains that characterize higher primates. Over tens of millions of years, primates diversified and spread across the tropical forests of Africa, Asia, and South America, evolving into many different forms adapted to different ecological niches. Some lineages remained small and nocturnal, while others became larger and more diurnal, and some began to spend more time on the ground rather than in the trees. The evolution of intelligence in primates is closely tied to their social behaviour and their ecological challenges. Primates are highly social animals, living in groups where individuals must navigate complex relationships, remember who is allied with whom, predict the behaviour of others, and engage in cooperation and competition and sometimes deception. This kind of social complexity creates strong selective pressure for intelligence, because individuals who can understand and manipulate social situations are more likely to succeed in finding mates and raising offspring. At the same time, many primates eat foods that require complex processing, like fruits that must be peeled or nuts that must be cracked open, and they must remember where and when different food sources are available, creating cognitive demands that favour larger brains and better memory. The combination of social complexity and ecological challenge appears to be a powerful driver of intelligence, not just in primates but in other groups like cetaceans and elephants that also live in complex social environments and face demanding ecological problems. Around 6 or 7 million years ago, one lineage of African apes gave rise to the hominins, the group that includes modern humans and our extinct relatives. The early hominins were not particularly brainy by modern standards, with brain sizes only slightly larger than those of chimpanzees, but they had one crucial innovation. They walked upright on two legs, freeing their hands for carrying objects and manipulating tools. Bipedalism is one of the defining characteristics of the hominin lineage, and while its origins are still debated, it appears to have evolved in response to changing environmental conditions in Africa, perhaps as forests gave way to more open savanna habitats where upright posture allowed better visibility and more efficient long-distance travel. Over the next several million years, hominins evolved larger brains, more sophisticated tools, and more complex social behaviors, gradually becoming more and more human-like in their anatomy and their capabilities. The evolution of the human brain is one of the most dramatic examples of rapid evolutionary change known from the fossil record. Around 2.5 million years ago, the hominin brain began to expand significantly, 450 ccns in Australopithecus to about 600 ccns in early Homo, and then continuing to grow over the next 2 million years until reaching the modern human average of about 1,350 ccns. This tripling of brain size in a relatively short time is extraordinary and suggests that there were very strong selective pressures favouring intelligence in the hominin lineage. The costs of a large brain are substantial, requiring enormous amounts of energy to maintain, and making childbirth more difficult and dangerous, so the benefits must have been equally substantial to overcome these costs. The benefits presumably included better tool use, more sophisticated social coordination, improved communication, and enhanced problem-solving abilities, all of which would have increased survival and reproductive success in the challenging and variable environments where early humans lived. Language is another crucial component of human intelligence, setting us apart from all other animals and allowing us to communicate abstract ideas, coordinate complex activities, teach skills to the next generation, and build cumulative culture that grows and changes over time. The origins of language are difficult to trace because language does not fossilize, leaving no direct evidence in the archaeological or paleontological record. But we can infer from indirect evidence, like the anatomy of the vocal tract and the structure of the brain and the complexity of tools and other artifacts, that language probably evolved gradually over hundreds of thousands of years, starting with simple vocalizations and gestures, and slowly becoming more complex and structured until it reached the fully modern form we use today. Some researchers believe that fully modern language only emerged within the last 100,000 years or so, while others argue that it may be much older, possibly dating back 500,000 years or more. Whatever the exact timeline, the emergence of language was a watershed moment in human evolution, enabling a level of cooperation and cultural transmission that no other species has achieved. Having traced the story of mass extinctions and the evolution of intelligence through hundreds of millions of years, we now arrive at much more recent times, at events that occurred not in the deep geological past, but within the time frame of human existence and human memory. The end of the last ice age, approximately 11,700 years ago, was marked by a sudden and dramatic climate shift known as the Younger Dryas, a period of intense cold that lasted for about 1,200 years and that interrupted the general warming trend that had been bringing the Earth out of glacial conditions. During the Younger Dryas, temperatures in the northern hemisphere dropped rapidly, glaciers that had been retreating began to advance again, and ecosystems that had been adapting to warmer conditions were thrown into chaos. Many large mammals, including mammoths and mastodons and giant ground sloths, went extinct during or shortly after this period, in what is known as the Quaternary extinction event, one of the most recent major die-offs in Earth's history. The cause of the Younger Dryas has been debated for decades, with most scientists attributing it to changes in ocean circulation caused by massive floods of meltwater from retreating ice sheets. But a controversial alternative hypothesis has emerged in recent years, suggesting that the cooling may have been triggered by an extraterrestrial impact, or by a series of impacts from fragments of a comet or asteroid. This hypothesis, known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, points to evidence of high-temperature materials and unusual chemical signatures in sediment layers dating to the beginning of the Younger Dryas, materials that proponents argue could only have been created by an impact. The hypothesis also notes that the extinctions of large mammals coincide with this event, and that some indigenous cultures have oral traditions describing catastrophic fires and floods and falling stars, which could be cultural memories of actual impact events. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis remains highly controversial and is not accepted by most geologists and paleoclimatologists, who argue that the evidence for an impact is ambiguous and that conventional explanations involving changes in ocean circulation are sufficient to explain the climate shift. But the hypothesis is significant because it raises the possibility that Earth has experienced catastrophic impacts within the time frame of human existence, and that these impacts may have had profound effects on human societies and on the development of civilization. If an impact did occur at the beginning of the Younger Dryas, it would have been devastating for the humans living at that time, most of whom were hunter-gatherers living in small mobile groups. The immediate effects would have included fires, shockwaves and floods, while the longer-term effects would have included climate disruption, loss of food sources, and potentially the collapse of regional populations. Such an event would have been preserved in cultural memory as a great catastrophe, a time when the world nearly ended, and it is intriguing that many cultures around the world have myths of a great flood or a time of fire and darkness that destroyed an earlier world. Even if the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis turns out to be incorrect, the Younger Dryas itself is a reminder that Earth's climate can change dramatically and rapidly, and that such changes can have catastrophic effects on life. The cooling that occurred during the Younger Dryas happened over just a few decades, fast enough that individuals living through it would have noticed the changes within their lifetimes, and it persisted for over 1,000 years, long enough to force major adaptations in both human societies and in the ecosystems they depended on. Some researchers have suggested that the stress of the Younger Dryas may have actually pushed human societies toward agriculture as the climate became more unpredictable and the traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle became more difficult to sustain. The transition to agriculture is one of the most important developments in human history, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to the rise of cities and states and eventually to the technological civilization we have today. If this theory is correct, then one of Earth's recent catastrophes may have inadvertently accelerated the development of human civilization, demonstrating once again the complex and often counterintuitive ways that disasters can shape the course of evolution in history. A quaternary extinction event that accompanied the end of the Ice Age is also significant because it represents one of the few times when humans themselves may have played a major role in causing extinctions. The large mammals that disappeared during this period, animals like mammoths and giant ground sloths and saber-toothed cats, had survived many previous climate changes and Ice Age cycles without going extinct, suggesting that climate alone may not be sufficient to explain their disappearance. What was different this time was the presence of human hunters armed with sophisticated weapons and hunting techniques and spreading into new continents where the native animals had no prior experience with human predation. The timing of extinctions closely matches the arrival of humans in different parts of the world, with megafauna disappearing from Australia shortly after humans arrived there around 50,000 years ago, from the Americas shortly after humans arrived there around 15,000 years ago, and from islands like Madagascar and New Zealand shortly after human colonization in much more recent times. This pattern strongly suggests that human hunting was at least a contributing factor, and possibly the primary cause of these extinctions, making modern humans one of the first species capable of causing major ecological disruption on a global scale. This realization is sobering, because it means that even before the development of agriculture and technology and industrial civilization, Humans were already having a profound impact on the planet, driving other species to extinction and altering ecosystems in ways that would persist for thousands of years. If hunter-gatherers with Stone Age technology could cause such damage, what might we be capable of now with our vastly more powerful tools and our global presence and our ability to alter the very chemistry of the atmosphere and the oceans? The history of extinctions teaches us that intelligent species are not immune to causing catastrophes, and indeed that intelligence itself, if not guided by wisdom and restraint, can become a danger to the biosphere and to the intelligent species itself. This brings us to the most important question of all. Are we in danger of causing our own extinction, of becoming just another failed experiment in Earth's long history of trying to evolve intelligent life? We now live in what many scientists call the Anthropocene, a proposed new geological epoch defined by the dominant influence of human activity on Earth's climate and ecosystems. This influence began to accelerate with the Industrial Revolution about 250 years ago, when humans began burning fossil fuels at an ever-increasing rate, releasing carbon dioxide that had been locked away in coal and oil and natural gas for hundreds of millions of years, and adding it back to the atmosphere. The result has been a rapid increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels from about 280 parts per million in pre-industrial times to over 420 parts per million today, a change that has occurred far faster than any natural climate change in the geological record, except for the most catastrophic extinction events. This increase in carbon dioxide is causing global temperatures to rise through the greenhouse effect, melting ice sheets and glaciers, raising sea levels, acidifying the oceans and disrupting weather patterns around the world. But climate change is only one of the many ways that humans are altering the planet. We are also causing extinctions at a rate that rivals the major mass extinctions of the geological past, destroying habitats through deforestation and urbanization and agricultural expansion, overfishing the oceans, polluting air and water and soil with chemicals and plastics and heavy metals, and spreading invasive species around the world that outcompete and prey upon native species. The current rate of extinction is estimated to be anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate, and some researchers warn that we may be in the early stages of a sixth mass extinction, one that is entirely caused by human activity, and that could eventually rival the Great Dying in its severity if current trends continue. Unlike the previous mass extinctions, which were caused by natural forces like volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts and climate shifts that organisms had no control over, this extinction is being caused by a single species that has the intelligence and the technology to understand what it is doing and to change course if it chooses to. The question is whether we will choose to change course, whether we will find the collective will and wisdom to address the problems we have created before they become catastrophic and irreversible. The signs are not encouraging. Despite decades of warnings from scientists and despite mounting evidence of the damage we are causing, global CO2 emissions continue to rise, forests continue to be cut down, species continue to go extinct, and the human population continues to grow, putting ever-increasing demands on the planet's finite resources. There are efforts to address these problems, including renewable energy technologies and conservation programs, and international agreements to limit emissions and protect biodiversity. But these efforts are still insufficient to reverse the trends or even to slow them significantly. We are conducting a vast and uncontrolled experiment on the only planet we have, with no backup plan and no clear understanding of where the tipping points might be or when we might cross them and trigger irreversible changes. Some scientists and futurists argue that technology itself might provide solutions, that we could develop geoengineering techniques to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or reflect sunlight back into space, or that we could genetically engineer organisms to be more resilient to climate change, or that we could even colonize other planets and spread human civilization beyond Earth. These ideas are controversial and raise profound ethical and practical questions about our ability to control complex natural systems, and about whether technological fixes can address problems that are fundamentally caused by our values and our economic systems and our relationship with nature. There is a real danger in believing that technology will save us, because this belief can become an excuse for inaction, a reason to keep doing what we are doing in the hope that some future innovation will solve the problem without requiring us to make difficult changes to our lifestyles and our economies. History teaches us that civilizations that fail to adapt to changing circumstances tend to collapse, and that intelligence alone is no guarantee of survival if that intelligence is not applied wisely. The concept of civilizational collapse is particularly relevant when we consider the question of whether Earth has reset intelligent life before. Many ancient civilizations have collapsed over the course of human history, from the Maya in Central America, to the Anasazi in North America, to the various Bronze Age civilizations in the Mediterranean and Middle East. These collapses were caused by a variety of factors, including environmental degradation, climate change, resource depletion, warfare, and social upheaval, often acting in combination to create a perfect storm that overwhelmed the civilization's ability to cope. In most cases, the collapse was not total, meaning that the people themselves did not go extinct, but rather their complex societies broke down into simpler forms, losing writing and technology and urban centers, and reverting to smaller-scale agricultural or pastoral lifestyles. But the loss of knowledge and capability was still profound, with skills and techniques and cultural achievements disappearing and sometimes never being recovered. If a collapse severe enough were to occur on a global scale, affecting not just one civilization but all of human society simultaneously, the loss could be catastrophic and might set us back thousands of years or more. This is where the parallel with previous mass extinctions becomes particularly troubling. The extinctions of the past show us that Earth has no mercy, that it operates according to physical and biological laws that do not care about intelligence or consciousness or culture, that will reset the biosphere whenever conditions become unfavorable enough, regardless of what organisms are living at the time. If we cause our own extinction through climate change or nuclear war, or ecological collapse or some other catastrophe, Earth will simply continue on without us, and evolution will eventually produce new forms of life that will fill the empty niches we leave behind. On geological timescales, our entire existence as a species will be a tiny blip, a brief moment when a clever ape figured out how to manipulate its environment but then pushed things too far and destroyed itself. Future intelligent species, if they ever evolve, will have to discover the hard way that intelligence is a double-edged sword, that it can build wonders and uncover the secrets of the universe, but that it can also create weapons and poisons and climate change that threaten the very existence of the species that wields it. The possibility that human civilization might collapse or that we might drive ourselves to extinction naturally leads to the question of whether this has happened before, whether there have been other intelligent species on Earth that rose to prominence and then vanished, leaving little or no trace for us to find. This question has been explored in a scientific framework through what is known as the Silurian hypothesis, named after a fictional reptilian species from the British science fiction television series Doctor Who. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by astrophysicist Adam Frank and NASA climate scientist Gavin Schmidt, is not a claim that ancient civilizations actually existed, but rather a thought experiment that asks what kind of evidence we would expect to find if an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, and what the chances are that we would be able to detect such a civilization given the limitations of the geological record. The hypothesis begins with the observation that most of what human civilization has built will not survive for geological timescales. Our cities are made of steel and concrete and glass, materials that corrode and decay and break down into unrecognizable forms within thousands of years. Our plastics will last longer, but even they will eventually fragment and degrade, and while they might leave chemical signatures in sediments, these signatures would be subtle and easily missed or misinterpreted. Our infrastructure, Our roads and bridges and dams will all erode away, and even our greatest monuments will eventually crumble to dust. The only things that might survive in recognizable form are a few very durable artifacts made of materials like ceramics or certain alloys, and even these would be scattered and rare and might be mistaken for natural formations rather than artificial objects. If our civilization were to end today, and if a future species were to search for evidence of our existence 10 million years from now, they would have a very difficult time finding anything conclusive. But the hypothesis goes further and asks whether there might be other types of evidence that would survive even if artifacts do not. One possibility is chemical signatures, unusual concentrations of elements or isotopes or synthetic compounds that do not occur naturally and that could only have been produced by industrial processes. Modern civilization has altered the chemistry of the planet in numerous ways, increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, creating plastics and synthetic chemicals that are now found in sediments worldwide, releasing radioactive isotopes from nuclear weapons testing and nuclear power plants, and mining and processing metals on a scale that has left geochemical fingerprints. These chemical signals might survive in sedimentary rocks for millions of years, though they would be diluted and dispersed, and might require very careful analysis to detect. The question is whether we would recognize such signals as evidence of a lost civilization, or whether we would interpret them as natural phenomena or as artifacts of our own contamination of the samples. Another type of evidence that might survive is changes to the fossil record, specifically the sudden extinction or appearance of species at a particular point in time. An industrial civilization would likely cause extinctions through habitat destruction and pollution and climate change, and these extinctions would leave a signature in the fossil record as a sudden drop in biodiversity. At the same time, the civilization might transport species around the world, creating invasive species events that would show up as the sudden appearance of organisms in regions where they did not previously exist. The challenge is that these patterns could also be caused by natural events, like volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts or climate changes, so they would not be definitive proof of a civilization unless they were associated with other evidence. The Silurian hypothesis suggests that the best evidence for a lost industrial civilization would be a combination of signals, chemical anomalies, changes in the fossil record, and possibly unusual concentrations of certain minerals or isotopes, all occurring at the same stratigraphic level, and all difficult to explain by natural processes alone. When we apply the criteria of the Silurian hypothesis to the geological record, we find that there are indeed some anomalies and mysteries that have not been fully explained by conventional geology. There are layers of rock with unusual chemical signatures. There are sudden extinctions and appearance events in the fossil record. There are formations that some researchers argue look artificial rather than natural, though these interpretations are highly controversial and not accepted by mainstream science. The problem is that the further back in time we look, the more the geological record has been disrupted and overwritten by subsequent processes, and the harder it becomes to distinguish genuine anomalies from the normal variations and gaps that characterize ancient rocks. For a civilization that existed more than a few 100 million years ago, the evidence would be so degraded and so fragmentary that we would likely never find it, even if such a civilization had existed, and even if we knew exactly where to look. Some researchers have pointed to specific sites and artifacts as potential evidence of ancient high technology or lost civilizations, including things like the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device that appears to be a sophisticated astronomical calculator, or the precision-cut stones of structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza, or the ruins at Pumapunku in Bolivia, which some argue show signs of advanced engineering knowledge. But while these artifacts are impressive and demonstrate that ancient peoples were more technologically capable than is often assumed, they do not provide evidence for non-human civilizations. or for civilizations existing millions of years ago. They are the products of human ingenuity working within the constraints of pre-industrial technology, and they can be explained without invoking lost super-civilizations or extraterrestrial intervention. The true mystery is not that ancient peoples built impressive structures, but rather that we tend to underestimate their capabilities and assume that anything sophisticated must have been beyond their reach. The Silurian hypothesis is valuable not because it proves that ancient civilizations existed, but because it forces us to think carefully about what evidence would look like and about the limitations of our ability to detect it. It reminds us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and that the deep past may hold secrets that we will never uncover simply because the information has been destroyed by geological processes. It also serves as a warning about our own civilization, because if an advanced industrial society can vanish from the geological record within a few million years, leaving almost no trace, then we should be humble about our place in Earth's history and mindful of the fact that everything we are building and everything we are accomplishing could be forgotten and lost if we do not find a way to survive over the long term. The stones and steel and glass that seem so permanent to us are ephemeral on geological timescales, and the only lasting legacy we might leave would be the changes we have made to the planet's chemistry and climate, changes that could take hundreds of thousands or even millions of years to reverse. Taking a step back and looking at the full sweep of Earth's history, from the first appearance of life nearly 4 billion years ago to the present day, we can begin to see patterns and cycles that repeat across different timescales and that shape the trajectory of evolution in profound ways. One of the most fundamental patterns is the cycle of diversification and extinction, the tendency of life to evolve and spread and fill every available niche until some catastrophe strikes and resets the system, clearing away the dominant groups and allowing new forms to emerge. This cycle has repeated at least 5 times during the Phanerozoic Eon, the last 540 million years of Earth's history, and possibly many more times if we include smaller regional extinctions and die-offs that did not rise to the level of mass extinctions. Each cycle has reshaped the biosphere, changing which groups are dominant and which are marginal, changing the structure of ecosystems and the nature of ecological interactions, and ultimately changing the trajectory of evolution in ways that could not have been predicted in advance. Another pattern that emerges from the deep time perspective is the tendency for complexity to increase over time, despite the periodic setbacks caused by mass extinctions. The earliest life forms were single-celled organisms, simple in structure and limited in their capabilities, but over billions of years evolution has produced increasingly complex multicellular organisms with specialized tissues and organs and sophisticated behaviors. This trend toward complexity is not inevitable or predetermined, and it has been interrupted many times by extinctions that wiped out complex organisms and forced evolution to start over from simpler forms. But the overall trend over geological time is unmistakable. Each time life recovers from an extinction, it eventually reaches and then surpasses the level of complexity that existed before the extinction, suggesting that there are selective advantages to complexity, and that evolution tends to explore the space of possible forms in the direction of greater elaboration and organization. Intelligence can be seen as the latest and most extreme example of this trend toward complexity, the evolution of nervous systems and brains, and cognitive abilities that allow organisms to process information, learn from experience, and make flexible decisions rather than simply following instinctive behaviors. Intelligence has evolved multiple times in Earth's history, in different lineages and in different forms, including in cephalopods like octopuses, in birds like crows and parrots, in cetaceans like dolphins and whales, and in mammals like primates and elephants. Each of these lineages has arrived at intelligence through a different evolutionary path and with different anatomical solutions, but they all share certain features, including relatively large brains, complex social behaviors, and the ability to manipulate their environment in sophisticated ways. This suggests that intelligence is not a unique accident that only happened once, but rather a strategy that evolution has discovered multiple times, a solution to the challenges of living in complex and unpredictable environments. But if intelligence is a strategy that evolution favors, why is it still so rare? Why? Out of millions of species that have existed over billions of years, have only a handful evolved the kind of advanced intelligence that we see in ourselves and our closest relatives? The answer is probably that intelligence is expensive and difficult, and not always advantageous. A large brain requires enormous amounts of energy to maintain, consuming perhaps 20% of the body's total energy budget in humans, despite making up only 2% of body weight. A large brain also requires a long developmental period during which the organism is vulnerable and dependent on parental care, and it requires complex social structures to support the transmission of learned information from one generation to the next. Many organisms get by perfectly well with much simpler nervous systems, following instinctive behaviors that are hardwired by evolution and that do not require the flexibility and learning that intelligence provides. Intelligence is only advantageous in environments where conditions are unpredictable, and where flexibility and problem solving provide a significant survival advantage. And even then, it is just one of many possible evolutionary strategies, not necessarily better than alternatives like faster reproduction, or better camouflage, or stronger physical defenses. The rarity of intelligence has important implications for the question of whether Earth has restarted intelligent life before. If intelligence is rare and difficult to evolve, then the chances that it evolved multiple times in Earth's history, only to be wiped out by mass extinctions, may be quite low. On the other hand, if the trend toward complexity is real, and if intelligence is simply the end point of that trend, then it is possible that intelligence has evolved many times, in lineages that we know about and perhaps in lineages that we do not, and that most of these experiments in intelligence have ended in extinction, leaving no trace for us to find. The only way to resolve this question would be to search systematically for evidence of ancient intelligence, looking for chemical signatures and geological anomalies and other clues that might indicate technological activity in the deep past. But such searches are hampered by the limitations of the geological record and by the difficulty of distinguishing genuine signals from noise and natural variation. One of the most intriguing aspects of the deep time perspective is the realization that Earth itself is a finite habitat, that the conditions for life will not last forever, and that the window of opportunity for intelligence to evolve and flourish is actually quite narrow in cosmological terms. The sun is gradually getting brighter as it ages, and in about 1 billion years, the increased solar radiation will likely cause the oceans to evaporate and the planet to become uninhabitable for complex life. Long before that, perhaps within a few 100 million years, the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere may drop below the threshold needed for photosynthesis, causing plants to die and food chains to collapse. If intelligence is to have any long-term future on Earth, it will need to find a way to leave the planet and spread to other worlds, becoming a spacefaring civilization rather than remaining confined to a single vulnerable planet. This is the ultimate challenge facing intelligent species, the test of whether they can develop the technology and the wisdom to ensure their own survival over timescales far longer than the lifetime of any individual or any civilization. When we consider the possibility that intelligent life has evolved and gone extinct multiple times on Earth, we are inevitably led to think about the broader question of intelligent life in the universe as a whole. The Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, is the apparent contradiction between the high probability that extraterrestrial civilizations should exist and the complete lack of evidence for or contact with such civilizations. If the universe is billions of years old and contains billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many of which have planets, then the sheer number of opportunities for life to arise seems almost incomprehensibly large. Even if the chance of life emerging on any given planet is extremely small, the vast number of planets should mean that there are many worlds where life has evolved, and some fraction of those worlds should have developed intelligent life and technological civilizations. Yet despite decades of searching, we have found no convincing evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. No radio signals or laser pulses or megastructures or any of the other signs that we might expect from advanced civilizations. The sky is silent, and we appear to be alone. Or at least we appear to be alone in our corner of the galaxy. There are many proposed solutions to the Fermi paradox, ranging from the possibility that life is far rarer than we think, to the idea that intelligent civilizations tend to destroy themselves before they become detectable, to the suggestion that advanced civilizations intentionally hide their presence, or exist in forms that we cannot recognize. One particularly sobering possibility is known as the Great Filter, a concept that suggests there is some barrier or challenge in the evolution of intelligent life that is extremely difficult to overcome, and that most attempts to develop technological civilization fail at this point. The Great Filter could be in our past, meaning that the hard step was the origin of life itself, or the evolution of complex cells, or the emergence of multicellular organisms, or the development of intelligence, and that we are lucky to have made it this far. Or the Great Filter could be in our future, meaning that technological civilizations tend to destroy themselves, or face some insurmountable challenge that prevents them from spreading through space and becoming long-lived and detectable. If the Great Filter is in our future, then the history of mass extinctions on Earth becomes particularly relevant, because it suggests that even intelligent species are not immune to catastrophes, and that the step from planetary civilization to interstellar civilization may be far more difficult than we imagined. Every mass extinction in Earth's past can be seen as a test of survival, a challenge that organisms must pass in order to continue existing, and most species have failed these tests. If intelligence does not provide a significant advantage in surviving planetary catastrophes, then the chances that any given intelligent species will last long enough to develop space travel and colonize other worlds may be quite low. This would explain why we have not detected any alien civilizations. They all face the same challenges we do, the same tendency for planets to periodically reset their biospheres through impacts and eruptions and planet shifts, and most of them go extinct before they can escape their home worlds and spread through the galaxy. Alternatively, the silence of the cosmos might indicate that intelligence itself is the Great Filter, that the evolution of intelligence carries with it certain dangers and tendencies that make self-destruction likely. Intelligence allows a species to manipulate its environment on a large scale, to develop technologies that can harness enormous amounts of energy, to create weapons capable of destroying entire civilizations, and to alter planetary systems in ways that may be irreversible. If intelligence tends to develop faster than the wisdom needed to use it responsibly, then technological civilizations might routinely destroy themselves through warfare or environmental destruction or resource depletion, eliminating themselves from the cosmic stage before they can make their presence known. This would be a tragic irony. The very thing that makes us special, our capacity for complex thought and innovation, might also be the thing that dooms us, making intelligence an evolutionary dead end rather than a pathway to cosmic significance. The history of human civilization provides some support for this grim possibility. We have developed technologies capable of destroying ourselves multiple times over, from nuclear weapons that could render the planet uninhabitable to fossil fuel emissions that are causing climate change to synthetic chemicals and genetically modified organisms whose long-term effects we do not fully understand. We have demonstrated repeatedly that we are capable of causing harm on a global scale, and yet we have not developed the political institutions or the ethical frameworks or the collective wisdom needed to manage these technologies responsibly. We stumble forward, driven by competition and short-term thinking, and and the momentum of economic systems that reward growth and consumption over sustainability and long-term planning. If this is a common pattern for intelligent species, if the development of technology always outpaces the development of wisdom, then the cosmos might be littered with the ruins of dead civilizations, worlds that once hosted intelligence but that now lie silent and lifeless, monuments to the failure of consciousness to overcome its own self-destructive tendencies. But there is another possibility, more hopeful though perhaps less likely, which is that the great filter is in our past, that we have already overcome the hardest steps, and that the future is open to us if we can just avoid destroying ourselves. If the origin of life or the evolution of intelligence is the rare and difficult part, then the fact that we exist at all means we are part of a very select group, and our responsibility is to preserve what we have achieved and to take it forward into the future. In this view, the silence of the cosmos does not mean that we are doomed, but rather that we are pioneers, among the first intelligent species to emerge in our region of the galaxy, with the opportunity to shape the future and perhaps even to seed life and intelligence throughout the stars. This is the vision that motivates much of space exploration and astrobiology, the hope that we can escape the cycle of extinction and reset that has characterized Earth's history and become something more permanent, something that lasts not just for thousands or millions but for billions of years, a cosmic presence rather than a planetary footnote. Throughout human history, cultures around the world have preserved stories of great catastrophes that destroyed previous worlds or earlier versions of humanity. Myths that speak of floods and fires and falling stars and angry gods who punished humankind for its sins or its hubris. The most famous of these is probably the biblical story of Noah's Ark and the great flood that covered the entire earth, killing all living things except those that were saved on the ark. But similar flood myths appear in Mesopotamian literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Hindu texts like the Matsya Purana, in Greek mythology with the story of Deucalion, and in indigenous traditions from North America and South America and Australia, and countless other places. The ubiquity of these flood myths has led some researchers to suggest that they might preserve actual memories of real catastrophic floods that occurred at the end of the last ice age, when rising sea levels inundated coastal areas and river valleys where early human settlements were concentrated. Other myths speak of fire from the sky, or of darkness that lasted for days or years. Events that could be interpreted as cultural memories of volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts. The Greek myth of Phaethon tells of a son of the sun god who lost control of the solar chariot and nearly set the earth on fire before being struck down by Zeus, a story that some have suggested could represent an ancient memory of a cometary impact or a brilliant meteor shower. The Norse myth of Ragnarok describes a final battle at the end of the world involving fire and flood, and the death of gods and the destruction of the cosmos, followed by a renewal and rebirth, a cyclical pattern that mirrors the scientific understanding of mass extinctions and recovery. The Maya believed in a series of world ages, each of which ended in catastrophe and was followed by the creation of a new world, a concept that is remarkably similar to the geological reality of Earth's repeated mass extinctions and resets. The question of whether these myths contain kernels of historical truth is difficult to answer definitively, because myths are not historical documents, and they are not intended to be factual accounts of past events. They are stories that encode cultural values and provide explanations for natural phenomena, and help societies make sense of their place in the world. They are passed down through oral tradition and changed and embellished over generations, mixing fact and fantasy and metaphor in ways that make it nearly impossible to separate the historical core from the mythological elaboration. But at the same time, we know that oral traditions can preserve information for surprisingly long periods, that some indigenous cultures have stories that accurately describe geological features or astronomical events that occurred thousands of years ago, demonstrating that cultural memory can extend much further back than written history. It is at least plausible that some myths of ancient catastrophes do preserve dim memories of real events, floods and volcanic eruptions and climate changes that occurred during the transition from the Ice Age to the modern climate, events that would have been dramatic and traumatic for the people who lived through them. If this interpretation is correct, then myths are not just stories but also a form of historical record, a way that pre-literate societies preserved information about their past and passed it down to future generations. The problem is that without independent evidence from archaeology or geology, we cannot know which myths are based on real events and which are purely imaginative constructs. We need to find physical evidence, things like flood deposits or impact craters or volcanic ash layers that can be dated and correlated with the time periods when the myth supposedly originated. And even then, we have to be careful not to overinterpret the evidence or force it to fit the mythological narratives. Science and mythology are different ways of understanding the world, and while they sometimes intersect and inform each other, they operate according to different rules and should not be conflated or confused. Some researchers have pushed the interpretation of myths much further, arguing that stories of advanced ancient civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria might actually refer to real lost cultures that achieved high levels of sophistication before being destroyed by catastrophes and forgotten by history. The story of Atlantis comes from the Greek philosopher Plato, who described it as a powerful island civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time and that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods. Plato presented the story as a moral lesson about the dangers of hubris and imperialism, and most scholars believe he invented it entirely as a philosophical allegory, but some have suggested that it might be based on garbled memories of real places, perhaps the Minoan civilization on Crete, which was devastated by a volcanic eruption and tsunamis around 1600 BCE, or perhaps some even older culture that has left no archaeological trace. The problem with these interpretations is that they require accepting that very advanced civilizations existed long before the conventional historical record begins, and that these civilizations left no clear archaeological evidence, despite supposedly having impressive technology and architecture. The idea of lost advanced civilizations has been popularized in recent decades by authors like Graham Hancock, who argues that a sophisticated global civilization existed during the last ice age and was destroyed by catastrophic floods and climate change at the end of the Younger Dryas period, around 11,600 years ago. Hancock points to various archaeological sites around the world, including places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and the pyramids of Egypt, and the ruins at Tiahuanacu in Bolivia, and argues that they show signs of knowledge and capabilities that should not have existed in the time periods when mainstream archaeology dates them. He suggests that these sites might have been built by survivors of the lost civilization or influenced by their knowledge, preserving ancient wisdom that was otherwise forgotten. These ideas are intriguing and have captured the imagination of many people, but they are not accepted by the scientific mainstream, which argues that the evidence Hancock cites can be explained by conventional archaeology without invoking lost civilizations, and that many of his claims are based on misunderstandings or misrepresentations of the archaeological and geological data. The debate over lost civilizations highlights the tension between wanting to believe in mysteries and lost knowledge and adhering to the rigorous standards of evidence that science demands. It is certainly true that there is much about the deep past that we do not know, and that archaeology is constantly uncovering new sites and revising our understanding of when and how various developments occurred. It is possible, even likely, that there were human cultures in the distant past that were more sophisticated than we have given them credit for, that achieved impressive feats of engineering and organization without leaving the kind of extensive archaeological record that later civilizations left. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the claim that advanced technological civilizations existed tens of thousands of years ago and then vanished without leaving clear traces is an extraordinary claim that requires much more evidence than has been provided so far. Until such evidence is found, the idea of lost advanced civilizations must remain in the realm of speculation rather than established fact. Of all the mechanisms by which Earth has reset its biosphere over geological time, cosmic impacts stand out as perhaps the most dramatic and catastrophic, events of such violence and sudden devastation that they seem almost like the wrath of gods visited upon an unsuspecting world. An asteroid or comet striking Earth at velocities of tens of kilometers per second releases energy on a scale that dwarfs anything that human technology can produce, more powerful than all the nuclear weapons ever built combined. Enough to vaporize rock and create global firestorms and throw so much dust and debris into the atmosphere that it blocks out the sun for months or years. The Cretaceous-Paleogene impact that killed the dinosaurs was probably in the mid-range of possible impact sizes, large enough to cause global devastation, but not so large as to sterilize the planet entirely. Larger impacts have certainly occurred in Earth's history, particularly during the early period when the solar system was still crowded with debris left over from its formation, and these impacts would have been even more catastrophic, potentially vaporizing entire oceans and melting the surface of the planet. The role of impacts in shaping the history of life cannot be overstated. They are random events, unpredictable in their timing and their magnitude, striking without warning and with regard for the fitness or adaptedness of the organisms that inhabit the planet at the time. Unlike environmental changes that develop gradually and give organisms time to adapt or migrate, impacts happen so suddenly that there is no opportunity for evolutionary response, no chance for natural selection to favor traits that might confer survival. The only organisms that survive are those that happen to have characteristics that protect them from the immediate effects of the impact and the subsequent environmental chaos. Things like the ability to burrow underground, or to enter dormancy, or to survive on detritus rather than fresh plant growth. In this sense, impacts are the ultimate test of evolutionary preparedness, but they are a test that no amount of adaptation can fully prepare for. A lottery where survival is largely a matter of luck rather than fitness. The frequency of impacts on Earth has decreased dramatically over geological time, as the solar system has gradually cleared out most of the large debris that once cluttered its inner regions. During the first few 100 million years of Earth's existence, impacts were common and frequent, a period known as the Late Heavy Bombardment, when the planet was repeatedly struck by asteroids and comets, some of them large enough to vaporize any oceans that might have formed and to create a global magma ocean. Life could not have survived such impacts, and indeed, the origin of life may have been delayed until this period of heavy bombardment ended around 3.8 billion years ago. Since then, impacts have become progressively rarer, though they have never ceased entirely, and the Earth continues to be struck by smaller objects like meteors and occasionally by larger asteroids that can create regional devastation or even global effects. The statistical analysis of impact craters on Earth and on other planetary bodies allows us to estimate the frequency of impacts of different sizes. Small impacts involving objects just a few meters in diameter occur frequently, perhaps several times per year, but they usually burn up in the atmosphere or explode at high altitude without causing significant damage on the ground. The famous Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908, where a small asteroid or comet exploded in the atmosphere and flattened forest over an area of thousands of square kilometers, is an example of what a modest-sized impact can do. Larger impacts involving objects hundreds of meters or a few kilometers in diameter are much rarer but far more dangerous, capable of causing mass extinctions and global climate disruption. The Cretaceous-Paleogene impact was probably caused by an object about 10 kilometers in diameter, and events of this magnitude are estimated to occur on average once every 100 million years or so. Even larger impacts involving objects tens of kilometers across would be correspondingly rarer, but also correspondingly more devastating, potentially killing all large organisms and rendering the planet uninhabitable for complex life for millions of years. The realization that Earth is vulnerable to cosmic impacts has led to efforts to catalogue and track near-Earth asteroids, objects whose orbits bring them close to our planet and that might someday pose a collision risk. Programs like NASA's Near-Earth Object Observations have identified and characterized thousands of asteroids, measuring their sizes and orbits and calculating the probability that they might impact Earth in the future. So far, no known asteroid poses a significant risk in the next century, but the catalogue is far from complete, and there are certainly objects out there that have not yet been discovered and that could potentially be on a collision course. The good news is that with sufficient warning time, modern technology might be able to deflect an asteroid or alter its orbit enough to prevent an impact using techniques like kinetic impactors or gravity tractors or even nuclear explosions. The bad news is that these techniques are largely untested and would require years or even decades of warning time to be effective, meaning that a surprise impact from an object we did not see coming could still cause catastrophic damage. The history of impacts on Earth is also a reminder that our planet exists in a dangerous cosmic environment, that the solar system is not a safe and stable place, but rather a shooting gallery where collisions happen regularly on astronomical timescales. The Moon, which lacks an atmosphere and geological activity that would erase craters, is covered with impact scars, a visible record of the bombardment that both Earth and the Moon have experienced over billions of years. Earth's craters are mostly eroded or buried or subducted, but there are still about 200 confirmed impact structures scattered around the planet, ranging from small craters just a few meters across to massive structures like the Vredefort crater in South Africa, which is over 300 kilometers in diameter and is the largest verified impact structure on Earth. Each of these craters represent a moment of catastrophe, a day when the sky fell and the world changed, and each is a reminder that such events will happen again in the future, that the question is not if, but when the next major impact will occur. While cosmic impacts are dramatic and catastrophic, they are also relatively rare, and most of the mass extinctions in Earth's history have been caused not by impacts but by climate change and environmental disruption driven by internal processes within the Earth system. Climate on Earth is remarkably sensitive to small changes in various parameters, including the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the reflectivity of the surface, the circulation patterns of the ocean and atmosphere, and the distribution of continents and mountain ranges. These factors interact in complex ways, creating feedbacks that can amplify small perturbations into large climate shifts, sometimes pushing the planet into entirely different climate states that persist for millions of years. The concept of tipping points is crucial here. These are thresholds beyond which the climate system undergoes rapid and often irreversible changes, transitioning from one stable state to another in a way that can be catastrophic for organisms adapted to the previous conditions. One of the most important climate tipping points involves the ice albedo feedback, where changes in the extent of ice cover affect the amount of sunlight that is reflected back into space versus absorbed by the surface. Ice and snow are highly reflective, bouncing much of the sun's energy back to space and keeping the planet cool, while dark surfaces like ocean water and vegetation absorb more energy and warm the planet. When global temperatures rise and ice begins to melt, the newly exposed dark surfaces absorb more heat, causing further warming and further melting in a self-reinforcing cycle. Conversely, when temperatures drop and ice expands, the increased reflectivity causes further cooling, potentially leading to a runaway glaciation that could cover the entire planet in ice. This runaway glaciation may have actually occurred at least twice in Earth's history. During the Snowball Earth episodes around 720 and 635 million years ago, when geological evidence suggests that glaciers extended all the way to the equator and the oceans may have been largely frozen over. The Snowball Earth events were global catastrophes on a scale difficult to imagine potentially lasting for millions of years and creating conditions where most life would have been confined to a few refuges, like volcanic hotspots or deep ocean vents where liquid water and energy sources still existed. How life survived these events is still debated, but the fact that it did survive, and that complex multicellular organisms evolved shortly after the last Snowball Earth episode, suggests that these catastrophes, like other mass extinctions, may have actually spurred evolutionary innovation by creating extreme selection pressures and clearing away established species. The melting of a snowball Earth would have been equally dramatic, as volcanic carbon dioxide accumulated in the atmosphere over millions of years until it reached levels high enough to overcome the ice albedo feedback and trigger rapid warming. The transition from a frozen planet to a hothouse planet would have occurred over perhaps just a few thousand years, creating wild environmental swings that organisms would have had to adapt to or die. Another major climate tipping point involves changes in ocean circulation, particularly the thermohaline circulation, or global conveyor belt, that transports heat from the equator to the poles through a combination of temperature and salinity-driven currents. This circulation is crucial for maintaining relatively moderate climates at high latitudes and for distributing nutrients through the ocean, supporting the marine food web. But the circulation is vulnerable to disruption by changes in the salinity of surface waters, particularly in the North Atlantic where deep water formation occurs. If large amounts of fresh water are suddenly added to the surface, perhaps from melting ice sheets, the reduced salinity can prevent water from sinking and disrupt the entire circulation pattern. This is thought to have occurred during the Younger Dryas, when melting ice sheets in North America released massive amounts of fresh water into the North Atlantic, temporarily shutting down the thermohaline circulation and causing rapid cooling in Europe and North America. A similar disruption today could have catastrophic effects on climate and agriculture, particularly in regions that depend on the heat transported by ocean currents. The carbon cycle is another crucial component of Earth's climate system, determining how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere and thus how strong the greenhouse effect is. Carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere through weathering of rocks and through photosynthesis and burial of organic matter, and it is added back through volcanic eruptions and the decay of organic matter. These processes normally operate slowly and keep carbon dioxide levels relatively stable over millions of years, but they can be thrown out of balance by various events. Massive volcanic eruptions can release huge amounts of carbon dioxide in geologically short periods, overwhelming the removal processes and causing rapid warming. The burial of organic matter can remove carbon dioxide too quickly, causing cooling and potentially triggering glaciation. The feedback loops in the carbon cycle can create oscillations and instabilities, where the climate swings between different states in response to relatively small initial perturbations. Understanding these climate tipping points is crucial for understanding the mass extinctions of the past, and for assessing the risks we face today as we alter Earth's climate through our own activities. The carbon dioxide we are adding to the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels is pushing the climate system toward tipping points that could trigger rapid and irreversible changes, including the melting of major ice sheets, the disruption of ocean circulation, and the release of methane from permafrost and seafloor deposits. Some of these changes may already be underway, and once they are triggered, they may continue even if we stop emitting carbon dioxide, creating a commitment to further warming and further disruption that will last for centuries or millennia. The paleoclimate record shows us that Earth's climate can change rapidly and dramatically, and that the consequences of such changes for life can be catastrophic. We are conducting an experiment on our planet by altering the composition of the atmosphere, and we do not fully understand where the tipping points are or what will happen when we cross them. The emergence of human intelligence and technological civilization represents a fundamentally new development in Earth's history, the first time that a biological organism has gained the ability to deliberately and consciously alter the planet on a global scale. Other organisms have certainly had major effects on Earth's environment, from the cyanobacteria that oxygenated the atmosphere billions of years ago, to the plants that transformed the land surface and altered the carbon cycle, but these changes were unintentional side effects of metabolism and evolution, not deliberate engineering projects guided by intelligence and foresight. Humans are different. We understand, at least to some degree, how our actions affect the planet, and we have the theoretical ability to choose different courses of action based on that understanding. We can decide to cut down forests or to preserve them, to burn fossil fuels, or to develop renewable energy, to drive species to extinction, or to protect them. This capacity for deliberate choice makes us a new kind of force in nature, a force that operates not just through the blind mechanisms of natural selection, but through conscious decision-making and technological innovation. The term Anthropocene has been proposed to describe this new geological epoch, defined by the dominant influence of human activity on Earth's geology and ecosystems. The exact starting date of the Anthropocene is debated, with some researchers placing it at the beginning of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, others at the start of the Industrial Revolution around 1800, and still others at the mid-20th century with the nuclear age and the great acceleration of population growth and resource consumption. Regardless of the precise boundary, there is little doubt that humans have become a geological force, altering the composition of the atmosphere, changing the chemistry of the oceans, modifying landscapes through agriculture and urbanization, and causing extinctions at a rate that rivals the major mass extinctions of the past. The question is whether we will use our intelligence to create a sustainable relationship with the planet, or whether we will become yet another example of a species that overexploited its environment and collapsed, another entry in the long list of Earth's failed experiments in complexity and consciousness. The answer to this question will determine not just the fate of human civilization, but potentially the fate of all complex life on Earth. If we drive ourselves to extinction through nuclear war or ecological collapse or runaway climate change, we will take many other species with us, potentially triggering a mass extinction that could rival the Great Dying in its severity. The difference is that this time the extinction would be caused not by volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts, but by the actions of a single intelligent species that should have known better. Future paleontologists, if they exist, would find in the rock record a sudden and dramatic change in Earth's biosphere, a layer of sediment enriched in plastics and heavy metals and radioactive isotopes, beneath which lies the fossilized remains of a diverse world, and above which lies the evidence of a greatly impoverished biosphere struggling to recover. They would recognize it as an extinction event caused not by natural catastrophe, but by biological activity, making it unique among all the extinctions in Earth's history. But intelligence is not only a threat, it also offers possibilities that no other organism has ever had. We can learn from the past, we can model the future, we can develop technologies that allow us to live more sustainably and with less impact on the environment, and potentially, we can even repair some of the damage we have done. We can protect endangered species through conservation programs, we can restore degraded ecosystems, we can develop clean energy sources that do not emit carbon dioxide, we can create international agreements to limit pollution and preserve biodiversity. We can, in theory, become stewards of the planet rather than destroyers, using our intelligence to guide the future of Earth's biosphere in positive directions rather than simply exploiting resources until they run out. Whether we will actually do these things remains to be seen, but the potential is there, and that potential is what makes intelligence both dangerous and hopeful at the same time. There is also the possibility that human intelligence could eventually lead to outcomes that transcend the planetary scale entirely. Space exploration and the development of technologies for living beyond Earth could allow our species to escape the cycle of planetary extinction and become a multi-world or even interstellar civilization. spreading through the galaxy and persisting for timescales far longer than any species confined to a single planet could hope to achieve. This is the ultimate expression of intelligence as a planetary force, the ability to leave the planet behind and to ensure that consciousness and culture continue even if Earth itself eventually becomes uninhabitable due to the aging of the sun or some other long-term process. Whether this vision is realistic or merely a science fiction fantasy depends on whether we can solve the immediate problems we face, whether we can survive the next few centuries without destroying ourselves, and whether we can develop the technologies and the social structures needed to become a truly spacefaring species. The history of mass extinctions teaches us that survival is never guaranteed, that even successful and well-adapted organisms can be swept away by events beyond their control, and that intelligence alone is no guarantee of survival if that intelligence is not accompanied by wisdom and restraint. But it also teaches us that life is resilient, that it has survived every catastrophe thrown at it over billions of years, and that the survivors of extinctions can go on to achieve remarkable things, diversifying and evolving and eventually giving rise to new forms of complexity and consciousness. We are the current pinnacle of that long evolutionary journey, the descendants of organisms that survived every extinction event from the Ordovician to the present, and we carry within us the potential to either continue that legacy or to bring it to an end. The choice, to the extent that we have a choice, is ours to make, and the decisions we make in the coming decades and centuries will determine whether human intelligence becomes another failed experiment or whether it becomes the first intelligent species to truly understand its place in the cosmic story and to take responsibility for its own future and for the future of the biosphere that gave rise to it. As we reach the end of this journey through deep time, having traced the history of life on Earth from its earliest beginnings through 5 major mass extinctions and countless smaller catastrophes, we return to the question that opened this exploration: how many times has Earth reset intelligent life? The honest answer is that we do not know and may never know with certainty. The geological record is fragmentary and incomplete, preserving only the tiniest fraction of the organisms that have ever lived and revealing almost nothing about the mental lives and cognitive abilities of ancient creatures. The evidence that would be needed to definitively prove that intelligent civilizations existed in the deep past has almost certainly been destroyed by the relentless processes of erosion and tectonic recycling that reshape Earth's surface over millions of years. We can speculate. We can look for anomalies and chemical signatures and patterns in the fossil record, but we cannot prove or disprove the hypothesis that intelligence has evolved and been extinguished multiple times in Earth's history. What we can say with confidence is that Earth has reset complex life many times, that mass extinctions have repeatedly cleared the board and forced evolution to start over with whatever organisms managed to survive the catastrophe. We know that these extinctions were caused by a variety of mechanisms, including volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, climate change, ocean chemistry changes, and probably other factors that we have not yet identified or fully understood. We know that the survivors of these extinctions were not necessarily the most intelligent or the most complex, but rather those that happened to have traits that protected them from the specific dangers of each particular catastrophe. We know that recovery from mass extinctions takes millions of years, and that the world that emerges after an extinction is fundamentally different from the world before it, with different dominant groups and different ecological structures and different evolutionary possibilities. We also know that intelligence has evolved on Earth, that we are living proof of that, and that the capacity for complex thought and technological innovation is a real possibility within the space of biological forms that evolution can explore. We know that intelligence comes in many forms, and that it has evolved independently in multiple lineages, suggesting that it is not a unique accident, but rather a solution to certain types of environmental and social challenges. But we also know that intelligence is rare and expensive, and not always advantageous, and that most organisms get by perfectly well without it. the emergence of human-level intelligence appears to be a contingent outcome, dependent on a long and improbable chain of events and circumstances that could easily have gone differently at many points along the way. If any one of the mass extinctions in our evolutionary past had killed our ancestors, we would not be here to ask these questions. The possibility that Earth has reset intelligent life before us is sobering because it suggests that intelligence does not confer immunity to extinction, that even the most advanced and sophisticated species can be swept away by forces beyond their control or by their own mistakes. The silence of the cosmos, the absence of detectable alien civilizations despite the vast number of planets where life could potentially arise, supports this dark interpretation, suggesting that intelligence may be a common outcome of evolution, but that intelligent civilizations rarely last long enough to spread through space and become a permanent cosmic presence. The Great Filter may be in our future, a challenge that we have not yet faced and may not be able to overcome, a test that most intelligent species fail. But there is also room for hope in this story, because the fact that we exist at all demonstrates that life is resilient, that evolution is creative and persistent, and that the universe is capable of producing consciousness and self-awareness, and the capacity to understand itself through beings like us. We are not just products of evolution, but also participants in it, capable of shaping our own future and influencing the trajectory of life on Earth through our choices and our actions. We have reached a point in our development where we understand the dangers we face and where we have at least the theoretical capacity to address those dangers and to create a sustainable civilization that can persist for much longer than the few thousand years we have existed so far. Whether we will actually do this, whether we will find the collective will and wisdom to change course and avoid the fate that may have befallen other intelligent species, remains the great unanswered question of our time. The story of Earth's mass extinctions is ultimately a story about cycles and change and the impermanence of all things, a reminder that nothing lasts forever and that every age eventually comes to an end. The dinosaurs ruled for more than 160 million years and then vanished in the blink of a geological eye. The trilobites dominated the seas for nearly 300 million years and then went extinct. Countless other groups rose to prominence and then disappeared, their evolutionary experiments terminated by catastrophes they could not have predicted or prevented. We are just the latest chapter in this long story, and while we have achieved remarkable things in the brief time we have existed, we have no guarantee that our chapter will be any longer or more successful than those that came before. The Earth will continue to exist long after we are gone, will continue to spin through space and orbit the sun, and life will continue to evolve and diversify and fill every available niche with or without us. But perhaps this time can be different. Perhaps intelligence, if used wisely and guided by an understanding of our place in the cosmic story, can break the cycle of extinction and reset that has characterized Earth's history. Perhaps we can become the first intelligent species to truly understand the dangers we face and to take the necessary steps to ensure our own survival and the survival of the biosphere that gave rise to us. Perhaps we can spread beyond Earth and become a multi-world civilization, ensuring that consciousness and culture persist even if our home planet eventually becomes uninhabitable. These are possibilities, not certainties, but they are possibilities worth striving for, goals worth dedicating our collective intelligence and resources and creativity to achieving. The question of how many times Earth has reset intelligent life may be unanswerable, but the question of whether we will be reset, whether our intelligence will prove to be a dead end or a doorway to something greater, is still open. And the answer will be written by the choices we make in the years and decades and centuries to come. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let your mind wander through the vast expanses of geological time, through the ancient seas teeming with strange creatures, through the forests of giant ferns and club mosses, through the age of dinosaurs and the rise of mammals. through all the catastrophes and recoveries that have shaped the story of life on this planet. Let yourself feel the weight of deep time, the realization that we are part of something much larger and older than ourselves, participants in an evolutionary drama that has been unfolding for billions of years and that will continue for billions more. Let yourself contemplate the mystery of consciousness, the miracle of awareness, the improbable fact that the universe has become capable of looking at itself through eyes like yours and wondering about its own nature and its own future. Let yourself hold the tension between the sobering knowledge that extinction is always possible and the hopeful possibility that intelligence might transcend the cycles of destruction that have characterized Earth's past. And as you fall asleep, know that you are part of the story, that your existence is connected to every organism that has ever lived and every catastrophe that has ever occurred, and that the future, to whatever extent we can shape it, depends on the choices made by creatures like you, conscious beings capable of understanding their place in the cosmos and of deciding what kind of legacy they want to leave behind. Sleep well, knowing that the Earth has survived every challenge thrown at it so far, and that life, in some form, will continue, adapting and evolving and creating new expressions of complexity and beauty and consciousness, writing new chapters in a story that has no end in sight, only transformations and resets in the eternal dance of creation and destruction that defines existence itself in this vast and ancient universe we call home.